Okay, let's discuss FedEx Routes. Before we go forward, let me give you the legal disclaimer real quick. We do not represent the company being advertised, but rather the individual sellers and their distribution rights. The information contained in the videos are from previous questions and answers based on interaction with previous sellers and listings. So here we go. FedEx is a huge company. They are basically going head to head with UPS. The difference between the two business models is obviously UPS is employee based, and they own their trucks, and like I said, the employees work for UPS. FedEx, however, has taken a different stance, and they are going in the direction of an independently based business model. So to summarize, in general, FedEx ground and home delivery routes are going to be independently owned and operated, and the FedEx Express still has the employee-based business model, but as of today, there's rumors talking that may change. However, for all intents and purposes, right now, FedEx Express is employee-based. I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, hey, I never knew, the FedEx delivery guy was an owner of his own business. And that is true. Either the employee owns the route, or he's an independent contractor, or basically an investor owns it and he's an investor of that corporation. So bottom line is there are several different types of routes I want to cover real quick. One, we have FedEx ground. FedEx ground would entail like small businesses. FedEx home delivery would be primarily residential. And then we have what's called FedEx P&D, which is pickup and delivery, where you would, or your driver would take a semi to, let's say, a large sporting goods store, drop off the trailer, and then return with an empty trailer back to the terminal. We also have what's called line haul routes, and those are basically overnight runs that an employee will do for you, or you will do as a distributor. And basically, again, you're taking a semi from one point and bringing it back to another point. These can be 200 to 300, round trip mile type deliveries. It's one way there and one way back. So the most of the routes we see for sale are going to be the home delivery and the ground routes. And I want to just make this very clear. If you're driving a semi, or if your employees are driving a semi, you're going to need a CDL license or a Class A license. If you're just the owner and you don't intend to drive, you do not need to meet that requirement. Just your employee does. The same is true with FedEx ground and home delivery routes. You do not need a CDL license for these. Your driver just has to have previous experience on the same type of vehicle they intend to drive. I believe it's 6 months within the last year. Those could change. So to reiterate, the driver you employ must have experience driving a FedEx ground or home delivery step van or vehicle, but they do not need a CDL license for these. If you intend to drive, you do need to meet those requirements. If you do not intend to drive, if you just want to be a manager or an investor of the business, you do not have to meet those requirements. Just your employees do. So I want to talk about basically how we evaluate these businesses. First, I need to get into the two different types of models. One would be the ISP model, and that is primarily in the north part of the United States. And the PSA model basically is in the south part of the United States, which is the primary service area. So the difference between the two is the ISP model, it actually requires you to own 3 routes or more. The PSA model, you can still own 1 route and operate as an independent owner or individual. However, rumors are that FedEx is eventually going to adopt the entire ISP model and require you to own 3 routes or more. However, we just haven't seen that trending in the South yet. So that's kind of up in the air. Nobody really has a solid answer on that. For all intents and purposes, it's business as usual. And, I've been doing this for some years now, and I have not seen any changes being made. I want to get into what FedEx requires. FedEx requires you to incorporate. They're going to 1099 your corporation, and you must W-2 your employees. And when I say incorporate, it must be a corporation. It cannot be an LLC for liability purposes. All your employees must be W-2. They are not allowed to be 1099. All your employees are going to work on average, your drivers, from 7 to 5 doing deliveries. Peak season for FedEx is going to be during the holidays, November, December, very beginning of January, and then their business actually doubles then. So it's busy all year round. A lot of these routes are trending upwards. On average, you'll see routes 10, 15, 20%. FedEx is getting really aggressive. I have a lot of high-profile people who want to invest in these. It's kind of the thing to do now. I have people who own hedge funds on the New York Stock Exchange who invest heavily in these. I have people with large portfolios who have hundreds of routes nationwide who continue to invest in these. So it is a good business model, and FedEx is very aggressive. As far as financing, FedEx doesn't offer any financing. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want the liability. They don't want to recognize value. So on the open market, when you see a route for sale, you're going to have to find your own financing. I got to tell you, if you don't have the assets or collateral to borrow against, most of our sellers are getting cash deals for these, and they're not going to entertain SBA lending or seller financing. I'm not saying it's going to happen all the time, but for the most part, most of the time, they're not willing to entertain that. There's plenty of cash buyers out there who are willing to pay fair market value. When you come to evaluate these businesses, if it's a single owner operator type route, you're looking at a 1.5 to 2 year multiple of the cash flow, so a 1.5 to 2 year return on your investment. And a lot of distributors are under the impression, if it's a single owner operator route, that they can get 1 year of the gross. Not necessarily true. We both know, or we all know as buyers, that we're looking for the bottom line, and that is the cash flow or numbers. But in most cases, basically the cash flow is representative of 2 year gross. If you're buying a route or a business with multiple routes and the owner is just a manager, you're going to be looking at about a 3 year return on your investment, a 3 year multiple of the cash flow. Some routes are going to sell for a little bit more than that, and that might be because they have a ton of assets. So if you want to look at the route, for example, here in Arkansas, for example, the list price on that is $549. You can see the gross is $779 and the cash flow is $176. The amount of assets on this particular business is $333,000. So basically, that will conclude the FedEx thing. I do want to mention one more thing that you can do with these. The company has set up their business model very different from the other companies we represent. So they want to see investors coming in here. They want to see you managing employees. They don't need you to be owner operators. You can even operate these absentee owner. The company just requires that if you're not going to live in the state, that you have a full-time manager in place, but they actually have a separate contract they'll allow you to sign as an absentee owner. So great business model, definitely trending upwards. FedEx is very aggressive, and these are right now the routes to have if you have the cash. So this will conclude the FedEx overview. If you have questions, feel free to email me.